So within the first theme, David, we thought we'd start with you. Could you share with the audience an example of an investment that Admiral Capital has been involved with that was able to generate both strong financial returns, but also really compelling social impact outcomes?
And we adopted 25 kids and said, we're gonna mentor you in hospitality. So once a month they would come to our hotel. We'd take them through, food and beverage. We'd take them through housekeeping, maintenance, front office, and then by the end of the year, they had a pretty good sense of what that hospitality looked like in a hotel situation. And then they spent 5 days at the University of Houston, the hospitality school, learning about hospitality. And then we gave them a scholarship to University of Houston, the Hilton Hospitality School, if they wanted to pursue that. We had about 5 years where we did about 20 kids a year. And we took them down to Galveston, put them on the cruise ships, said this is how cruise ships work. And this is how the back of house works on a cruise ship. And so that was a great impact for those low-income neighborhoods.
Help us understand the economic geographic inequality that exists in the country today, and then how the Opportunity Zone legislation was really drafted as a solution to those problems in mind.
That's what Opportunity Zones was intended to do, was provide a tool. It's not a solution in and of itself. Opportunity Zones as an incentive is not a strategy in and of itself, but it's a tool for local policymakers, for local stakeholders, for local investors to weave into a broader strategy for expanding economic opportunity, bringing investment back into communities that have seen it depart. And that tool can be very powerful as an organizing principle. But we're on the path to that reconnection of community and capital that was hoped for by Congress when they passed this law.
And just wanted to get your opinion on what you think the risk is that this legislation potentially could be an incentive for projects that could be gentrifying communities and actually end up hurting instead of helping the communities they were designed to support.
Naturally, with something like Opportunity Zones that allows capital to flow into these communities, you might see that risk potentially being amplified. I actually feel it's sort of the wrong question or risk to focus on. I think it's more about, to John's point, as an important tool if you are a mayor in one of these cities, if you're a local civic leader, a local nonprofit leader, and thinking about the ways that, knowing that there will be capital and a capital influx into these zones, into your community, how do you organize in a way to sort of create the type of partnership that I think actually makes it a really effective tool and thereby mitigates that risk? And that we've seen that happen again and again, just more broadly in the impact investing industry, where public, private, and philanthropic organizations effectively partner together, knowing that they themselves cannot provide the whole solution and that they're going to be able to have most impact, the most sustainable impact, if they actually see themselves working together. So I think there is some risk there. The reality is that that alone is not going to create that gentrifying force. And I think with the number of organizations that are enthusiastic about wanting to see this capital flowing in and taking advantage of it, and knowing they themselves are very mission-minded and thinking about impact, that should be a really good counterbalance to an investor who may not understand the impact or know how to sort of bring that to the table, but with the right partners, they can certainly deliver it.
How's the Economic Innovation Group been armed with these questions? How is that a consideration going into legislation?
The natural law for low-income communities in our country is that they stay low-income or they get poorer over time. So the biggest risk to most long-term low-income residents in our country is the status quo. The great displacer of low-income residents in American communities is decline, not gentrification. That is not to say that displacement doesn't happen when you have rapid growth, because it certainly does, it certainly can. But I think we have to be clear-eyed about what is the status quo and what threat does that pose to the very people we're trying to help. And right now the status quo is a great displacer. People who are low income, who live in low income communities, are by definition less stable in their housing arrangements, less stable in their attachments to communities, less stable in their attachments to job markets. So part of this effort is building that connective tissue back, and reinvestment can help do that. So I look at gentrification as a signaler. If Opportunity Zones end up gentrifying, that's not because of Opportunity Zones, that's because the conditions were there already, or that process was already in place. About 3.5% of Opportunity Zones are gentrifying, 3.5% nationwide. Another study just came out that found that almost zero gentrification happens in heartland cities, second and third tier cities inside the coast. So where it does happen, it's a big challenge for displacement, and we have to be very intentional. You need an entirely different playbook in the rest of the country, that 95+%, where the concern isn't gentrification, it's a total lack of investment, it's a total lack of forward momentum. You need a very different playbook there when you don't have to worry about displacement, but But you do have to worry about, how do I get that first dollar to come back into my community? How do we get those blighted storefronts and those vacant homes to be rebuilt and reoccupied? Those require a very different set of tools, very different type of playbook for the local strategy. But in both cases, it requires investors and stakeholders who are aligned with their community's interests to step up early and shape the marketplace so that others can follow.
How do we actually create projects that communities need and want?
We have to do a better job of education, working with people, finding out what they need and helping them get into the situation. That's where the gentrification doesn't become as much of a problem. Help the local businesses, help the local people get more opportunities for them, understanding, hey, you may have to sell your house, but there's 1,000 opportunities here. You can be involved in the growth of your own city. This is a great opportunity for us to really pay attention to some of these areas that need the attention.
How important is it to have community leaders like David that are passionate about their local communities? How much of a difference does that make in galvanizing local support?
When you're trying to think about having an impact in a community, you really need to understand, what is it that the community needs? What do they lack? One of the big evolutions, and I think opportunity zones will really help to, further catalyze and amplify this, is actually creating hubs where not only are you creating housing in a great place to live, but you're bringing in all those services. And so having community leaders who can access those services, help to bring them together, and again, really understand what the community needs. I think that's the real call to action with opportunity zone investing as well.
I agree. I'll just say, I think it's so important that we recognize the untapped potential of our communities, and it's local leaders like David who can shine a spotlight on that and be inspirational, because people need to be inspired. But I think that's what I feel passionate about, and why it's great to hear David talk about this, because there's this recognition happening in places around the country that we are undershooting our potential in ways that have generational impacts, have generational consequences for people trapped in this negative cycle, and we have a chance to unlock that in a new way now. What you want to see, I think, at the core of this, to me, the most important signal indicator is entrepreneurship. It's new business formation. So the floor, to me, is real estate. It's important. It's obviously a first step in many cases. You have to make the built environment habitable for people and businesses. But the ceiling, we're going to find out over time, is how much can we invest in the growth businesses of the future and plant them and grow them and see them flourish in these untapped markets around the country.
If I look 10 years down the road, I'm hoping happens because of these opportunity zones is that people are buying into their community more by investment and by pride of community. That would be what I would like to see, that the more communities feel that pride of, this is who we are, this is what we're about, and there's opportunities for me as well.